Hello and welcome to The Debate. I'm Marzieh Hashimi. Thanks so much for being with us. While the alarm is rising on the spread of the Ebola virus, statistics, though not clear, say at least 3,500 people have died from what they think is Ebola in 2014. The majority of cases have taken place in West Africa, mainly Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. However, the first fatality has now taken place in the United States of a Liberian national recently arriving in the U.S. Now, many questions are being asked, from if this disease is man-made to whether it is being used as an excuse by the United States to control more African resources. This after U.S. President Barack Obama declared war on Ebola. But instead of ordering health professionals to Africa, he's ordered the deployment of thousands of military troops.
The deadly Ebola virus continues to spread in West Africa, taking a lethal toll in Guinea, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, and Senegal. Over 3,400 people have already lost their lives to the fatal disease in Africa. The disease has reached as far as the U.S., where 4 infected people have arrived. In the latest case, a man who's recently arrived from Liberia was diagnosed with the disease in Texas earlier this week. Health officials say he had been in contact with 100 people before being taken to the hospital. Texas health officials are now monitoring 50 people who had close contact with the man. The hospital where the patient is being treated has come under fire for how it handled his first visit there, with fever and abdominal pain 8 days ago. The hospital staffers were told twice that he had recently arrived from West Africa, but he was sent back home with an antibiotic. There are numerous speculations regarding the epidemic in Africa. Some believe the outbreak is a result of biological warfare waged by imperialist countries, particularly the U.S., against Africa. They claim that the disease is being tested on Africans and is even created in an attempt to reduce Africa's population. Some others claim that the U.S. is using the Ebola outbreak to further increase its military presence and reinforce its intelligence in Africa. They say it would be more logical for Washington to send in medical and healthcare staff instead of military troops to the affected nations. The Pentagon has announced that it will send nearly 4,000 troops to Liberia to help fight the spread of Ebola in the West African country. Some other assumptions accuse Washington of encouraging an Ebola outbreak on its own soil. They back their claim by saying that the U.S. government is not serious enough in fighting the disease and has even refused to ban air travelers from infected countries from entering the U.S. Another point of controversy is the information released on the patent secured by the U.S. government on the Ebola virus. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control, CDC, owns a patent on a particular strain of Ebola known as Eboban. The question here is, why would a government organization claim to have invented an infectious disease and then claim a monopoly over its commercial use? And the possible answer would be to cause panic, introduce a vaccine, and push countries into buying billions of dollars worth of vaccines.
I'd like to welcome my guest to the program, founder of American Institute for Foreign Policy, Mr. Michael Lane out of Washington, and political commentator Dr. Randy Short right here in Tehran. Welcome both of you to the program. Well, let's start this off with Mr. Lane. Now, Ebola is a deadly disease. Do you think that the global community is dealing with it in the right way?
I think we're starting to take steps in that direction. Clearly, the world community and the United States, as the leader of the world community, was several days late and several dollars short in terms of their reaction to the outbreak of Ebola. Where the president now is showing signs, President Obama is now showing signs that he recognizes Ebola as a threat to world health and world order and United States public health. He should have recognized that months before he finally did, and taken even more steps than he's taken so far to contain the outbreak back before it spread as far as it has.
What about that, Dr. Short? Do you agree with our guest, Mr. Lane, who said that now the United States is starting to take the precautions that it had needed to take before? Or do you see it in a different perspective?
I agree, if I'm following the hegemonic line, that this was a legitimate disease that just occurred freely in nature. But since I do not, frankly, what President Barack Obama should have done is call for secession of all American NGOs, corporations, not-for-profits doing non-consensual human experimentation in Africa and everywhere else in the world where it goes on. Ebola, I'm holding in my hands a patent that the U.S. government gave for Ebola in 2012. It says it's invented, and it was made in its abstract for experimentation. Governments in Africa were given about $140 million to let experimentation start in January of this year. And now we see people dying from it because it was a disease made to kill, and it's killing. And in reality, this late move, to me, has more to do with creating a panic so people can sell medication as well as kill Africans. This gentleman and I are going to disagree. I'm an African-American and quite proud of it. Anglo-Americans have been killing African people for profit and for land for 500 years. This is just another instance, and this is as clear as this government patent, and I dare him to tell me this is a conspiracy theory when they say they made it. When this has the U.S. Department of Health as an assignee to this patent, for someone to say to me that it's a conspiracy theory when they say so. Okay. This isn't a conspiracy theory.
Stay with me, Dr. Short.
Kill people and make money.
Stay with me, Dr. Short. Crossing over to Washington. Mr. Lane, your take on what our guest, Dr. Short, has just stated.
Well, I think he's a little over the top here.
No, I'm not over the top.
Let's figure out where we are.
I know exactly where we are. You deal with the patent, sir.
Okay.
When the government says they give a patent
Dr.
for
Short.
it, it's not over the top. Deal with the fact that I laid down. The fact is that it was made. It says it's invented. It has the name of the inventors on the patent.
Okay,
just check the internet.
Let me cross over to Washington.
Over the top. This is just being real.
Stay with me, Dr. Short. Go ahead, Mr. Lane.
I'm not familiar with the document that he has. I do know it exists. I don't deny its authenticity. But let's figure out why the government would have a patent on this. It looks to me, in the minimal amount of information I was able to find out about this document, this is a patent on a variant of the original disease. It's certainly well within reason, where when you're doing the research on cures and vaccines and things like that, that you would deal with variants on the disease and that you would use that as part of your research to find those cures and those vaccines. So the fact that the document exists and the fact that the document may be authentic is not in itself any sort of smoking gun.
It is authentic. Don't accuse me of lying. This is a government's document.
I never accused you, Dr. Short, of lying.
Well, let me just jump in here. Let me just jump in here. Dr. Short, why would the U.S. government want to, according to what you're saying, create such a deadly virus? Why would they want to do that?
Why would they have the syphilis experiments? Why would they have the pellagra experiments? Why is Dr. James, his name is escaping me, he's at the Mailman School at Columbia, do these kinds of things with Depo-Provera in the same areas? We have a history of doing all kinds of unjust and illegal things with substances, not just outside of the United States, but within. The Tuskegee experiment is the best known, but there are many, many others. And so it's time for this to stop. Bill and Melinda Gates, he just put his mouth in this. He's run non-consensual human experimentation that's watched people die in Africa. This is old. They did it to the Native Americans with certain diseases. As a person of part Native American descent, I can't be as clinical and detached as the gentleman in Washington. By the way, that's the land that was stolen from my people by whites using diseases like Ebola.
All right, stay with me both, I guess, Mr. Lane and Dr. Short. I want to cross over to our Facebook page and see what some of our viewers have said about this subject.
Defiantly, the Americans have developed a lab strain to use it as a weapon, and for sure this strain is that very lab strain. That's why it's spreading more quickly than the old natural strains seen before. The US is a scapegoat for all the losers out there who can't take responsibility for their own actions. They already have a vaccine and cure for this. That's why they already have a patent on it. AIDS didn't kill fast enough, so they created Ebola. AIDS and Ebola are attributed to US war factories, and that's what we call the NWO, New World Order. Why do they have to bring soldiers instead of doctors? Is Ebola a terrorist? Let the fools be fooled. This will definitely be an interesting debate. Can't use my guesswork to know whether Ebola is man-made or not. I only want to flip through each evidence provided from each side. All I know is that it is a dangerous infection. PressTV, why can't you make anything debatable without mentioning the US or Zionists? Come on, try to be mature enough, please. Didn't the US Public Health Service deliberately infect 600 impoverished African Americans with syphilis between 1932 and 1972 in an infamous Tuskegee clinical study? This is why the US government owns a patent on human Ebola virus species and compositions and methods thereof. Ebola is not a disease, it's simply a chemical warfare attack to show the world what they can do if their democracy is not accepted. Time for the usual Americans to arise against the murderous schemes their country is applying on others. I think you should Google patent CA2741523A1, then ask yourself the same question. Google this name about Jonathan S. Towner, inventor of Ebola, with patent number CA2745123A1. You can Google patent number.
Okay, well, lots of comments. Mr. Lane, let me get your perspective on some of our comments. There seem to be a lot of people that really believe that the United States is behind this. Your take, sir.
Well, you know, first of all, as I said in the first segment, it doesn't surprise me that our government is involved in experimentations here, that they're looking for variants on the virus, and they're also looking for cures, and they're looking for vaccines on the virus. In fact, I think it would be irresponsible of them not to do so. I think it would be similarly not surprising to find out that those research efforts are both military-funded and civilian-funded, Centers for Disease Control, et cetera. So none of those things shock me. I was sort of struck by the comments on the comparison between Ebola and AIDS, particularly yesterday. Science Magazine, the authority on this, published the definitive study that indicated that ground zero for AIDS was the capital of the Republic of the Congo, starting back approximately 1920, and that a perfect storm came together to facilitate the spread of AIDS globally, first throughout Africa and then globally over a period of 50, 60 years. So, you know, the comparison there is not the same. We don't know where Ebola came from. We will eventually find out where Ebola came from. I would be surprised to find out that it's a man-made and not a natural virus. I wouldn't be shocked beyond belief to find that out, but I would be surprised to find that out.
Okay,
I think
with
the
me,
experiments and the research has to be done.
All right. I want to read something. From 1974, we have Henry Kissinger. It says depopulation should be the highest priority of foreign policy towards the third world. We have a leader in the United States right now, Louis Farrakhan, Dr. Short, who's saying, quote, that the U.S. government is behind this to depopulate the world's black population. How likely is that a possible scenario?
Well, look at the National Security Memorandum 200. Look at the fact that even though this gentleman is saying he can't tell, when this says that the U.S. Department of Health in Atlanta, Georgia is a co-assignee for this, we have plenty of things. We don't have to go to Africa. Look at the United States. Things like fluoride in the water, which is twice as deadly for African Americans as whites, and yet they insist on keeping it in the water supply. Non-whites make up roughly 70% of the people aborted each year in the United States. When you look at the mass incarceration and you look at many other things, eugenics is as American as apple pie. Adolf Hitler, his people came to the United States to learn at the feet of Margaret Sanger. So in reality, and of course that's real unpleasant because Anglo-Americans don't like hearing that, yes, Hitler went to you, when he wanted to figure out what to do with unwanted populations, America is the place that does it best.
Margaret Sanger, can you just expand on that?
Margaret Sanger is the racist supremacist who started the American Birth Control League in 1917, and it became Planned Parenthood in 1943.
Okay.
She believed that there were too many non-white people and we were human weeds. And in 1939, started something called the Negro Project, where she felt that there's a way to quietly eliminate African Americans. And these sentiments weren't just hers, the same as outlined in Chapter 7 of Gunnar Myrdal's An American Dilemma.
Okay, stay with me. Dr. Short would love to get more into this, but of course, limited time. Mr. Lane, I want to look at another aspect of this. We saw last month that President Barack Obama ordered thousands of American troops to go and deal with the Ebola virus. It seems quite odd that he would order military troops on the ground to deal with Ebola. At the same time, we see that a country like Cuba has actually ordered medical personnel to go to West Africa to try to help. Why military troops? What can military troops do against this virus?
Well, first let me back up and say that I agree 100% with Dr. Short on Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood. He has that part of it exactly right, and I agree with him. More to your question, look, the whole thing needs to be organized first. Without the American military going in there, and I don't think it's going to stop at 4,000. I think we're going to see that number close to double by the time we're finished. We need to go in there and set up hospitals and medical facilities. Bring the portable hospitals in that will create beds and treatment centers for people who are infected with this horrific disease. That's what the military is supposed to do. I would be surprised and I would be disappointed if President Obama did not organize a large team of medical treatment professionals that will go in there and follow up the military. That's what needs to be done, and that's what I said in the very beginning of the show, that we're a day late and a dollar short on all these things. The military team should have been in there setting up the medical facilities 6-8 months ago, and the medical teams should have followed right on after that. I hope they do.
Dr. Short, what about that? There has been some criticism about why sending military troops now, and as the gentleman in Washington has just said, it's to set up, accordingly to him, that is to set up everything to get it in place first. Your take, sir? It's
already set up. In 1966, Dr. Ravenhall.
Yes, it is set up.
Let me finish. I didn't interrupt you. The United States, USAID, Office on Population, its director, Dr. Ravenhall, a vicious, virulent racist, convinced President Johnson that the United States should not provide medical care, clean water, or other things to people in Africa, Asia, and the developing world. It was against the geopolitical and strategic interests of the United States. And instead, eugenics, mass sterilization, mass abortion, even promoting things with now you've got this gay movement that President Obama is pushing as if he's a cheerleader for homosexuality. These things have been systematically pushed for 48 years. And not only that, they've done all the experimentation and sent dangerous drugs to Africa for decades and Asia. And this has been quite deliberate. So he's right. It's decades late and billions of dollars short. And there's big money made in experimenting and doing all kinds of things to people of African descent and in Asia. And keep your eyes peeled. They're working, doing unethical human experimentation right over in Pakistan and also Afghanistan with hepatitis C. Don't be surprised if one day you have an epidemic of some strange hepatitis in Iran because of people using, over in Fort Detrick, doing all kinds of wicked things, everything from making the anthrax that killed 2 postal workers where I live in Washington, D.C., and killed a postal worker at Howard University where I attended school.
Okay, stay with me, Dr. Short. What about that, Mr. Lane, about bioweapons? I mean, there are a lot of speculation right now that the United States perhaps is working more and more in developing and using bioweapons. Is it a possibility?
Certainly it's a possibility. I don't discount the fact that the United States historically has had a bioweapons program and probably leads the world in terms of research and effectiveness in turning various things into bioweapons. Now, we're also a world leader in terms of negotiating treaties where we finally wind up destroying these things and outlawing them and taking them off the battlefield. But you know, anything's a possibility. I don't deny that. Okay. But that doesn't mean that that's what's going on here. In fact, I doubt that's what's going on here.
Okay, Dr. Short, I'll let you close this. We're just about out of time. Your take, sir, your closing comments.
All the countries of the world, led by the United States, need to stop all human experimentation and all sorts of human rights violations in countries in Africa and Asia. And this was completely preventable. It was man-made, human-made. The patent is online. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's just fact. Shame on America, and I hope Obama doesn't treat this event as another opportunity to improve his golf game when people of color suffer.
And on that note, I'd like to
I think Dr. Short is connecting dots that can't be connected.
Well, I'm going to connect them anyhow. Thank you.
And on that note, that brings us to the end of this program. Founder American Institute for Foreign Policy, Mr. Michael Lane, out of Washington. We appreciate you being with us, as well as political commentator, Dr. Randy Short, right here in Tehran. And as always, viewers, we appreciate you being with us. Make sure you join us, same time, same place tomorrow. I'm Marzieh Hashemi signing out for The Debate. Goodbye.